Hey, how y'all doing today? Welcome back to the channel. It is now called Six String Lounge instead of my name. So I appreciate y'all stopping by. Today I'm just going to do a rig rundown. Stuff that I use for a variety of gigs. So I play in cover bands. I don't do anything original currently, but I do studio work. It's a whole different ball of wax. But we will go in and we'll check out the different amplifiers, pedals that I use for different applications. But there is a general core board that I use. It's very versatile. It can cover a lot of ground with a lot of different guitars. We all know that each guitar has its own unique thing happening. So, we'll have a look at that. Also, today we're going to look at a couple different amplifiers. You do need different power for different situations, and oftentimes a lot of people, may bring something that's underpowered, doesn't quite cut, even with it being mic'd up. It just doesn't do the job. And then there are other situations where you're just playing way too loud. So I'll show you kind of how I've navigated that throughout the years, and I'll show you what I'm currently using. And all this stuff is relatively inexpensive. You don't have to spend a ton of money to be able to go out and sound good live. So we'll talk about that in the comments below. I appreciate you stopping by. Let's get to it. Okay, we're back, and here is my board. So we're going to do it slightly different today, and I'm going to talk about each one of these guys, and then we'll get to the guitar and amplifier. But I figured I'd start with pedals because I know everyone loves pedals. So the signal starts off right here, the Analog Man Sunface. And this is the high gain. It's one of the less expensive, I guess less desirable fuzzes, but anything Analog Man makes is good, and this is no exception. It's a great fuzz, and it works very well with British voiced amplifiers, both Marshall style and Vox style. Not so much with high watt, and it does not sound good with Fender. But here's the trick. So we start here with the fuzz, and then the fuzz goes into just a standard crybaby wah. There is nothing special about this wah. It is right off the shelf. I believe at the time they were 99 bucks. They're probably still that cheap, maybe even cheaper. Just a regular crybaby. So fuzz, wah pedal. Then from the wah pedal, we go up here to the vibe. And I like having my vibe in front of everything. Well, obviously not in front of the fuzz, but I like the vibe right there after the wah. And then we go to the mute. That would be the chromatic tuner. So I do not have a pedal switching system. Well, it would be nice, but it would also add a great deal more to have to carry around. And, these pedals are relatively replaceable. I mean, the fuzz isn't, but, you can get the Univibe any day of the week. You can get the wah any day of the week. You can get the chromatic tuner. Here we have a Ibanez turbo tube screamer. So that's the trick, is if you have a clean amplifier, like a high watt or Fender, or just an amplifier that you can't really turn up that loud to get the power amp section working, you turn this on, and if you notice, I have it set very little drive levels there. I have it on the second mode, which kind of brings back the bass that you would lose from a normal tube screamer, and then tone to taste. This one seems to be a little on the dark side, so I kind of brighten it up with the tone there. But by turning on the tube screamer, it gives you that edge of breakup kind of tone through a Fender, and then this fuzz sounds absolutely glorious stacked into that. So next on our list is the OCD by Fulltone, and it's hard to mess with the OCD. It is just a fantastic drive pedal. It's got everything you want. Every single, phrase that you could think of all the hot words that everyone uses, transparent, chewy, so on, etc. This is a very, very good example of that. And I've had this one for about 7 years. Then we move into the Analog Man Prince of Tone. So King of Tones are great, but I do not need 2 of them. And the Prince of Tone is not an exact copy of the King of Tone. I want everyone to know that, because I've had both. The King of Tone is different. I wouldn't say it's better, but it is different. But the Analog Man Prince of Tone is a very good pedal. Very light, clean, slight breakup. Works really well with the tube screamer stacked into it. Or, I'll stack the sun face right there into the Analog Man Prince of Tone. The next up, we have a newcomer to the board. And the reason I've put the Ghs Angry Charlie on here is because for some amps it sounds great, but in some amplifiers it sounds like garbage. So it really depends on the amplifier. Not every amp is happy with this particular pedal, but it does do the Marshall in the box thing through certain amplifiers, not all of them. And then the Wampler Sovereign has to be the best distortion I've ever played, hands down, period. It cleans up like the best fuzz you've ever had. It can have it can have as much distortion as an Engel, Fireball. I mean, these things are ridiculously good. Better, in my opinion, than the Wampler Pinnacle, which is a great drive pedal, but they did something different. And also, just a quick aside, I want to mention too that the older Wampler pedals were made better. They're sturdier. They have reinforced parts. The new Wampler pedals, they are cutting corners. So just keep that in mind when you're spending all that money for a name. Now we come up to an old pedal that I've had for over a decade, and that's the Full Tone Fat Boost. And this has a detent, so it clicks into place and gives you different levels of drive. You have your volume, you have your tone. It is very, you can almost make it so you can't even tell it's on. But this is perfect for adjusting the volume. Let's say you're going from a Les Paul to a Strat or any other, a Tele. You can adjust this to just get the levels the same. And for a lot of you, I don't need to even go into what the HX Stomp is capable of. It is an all-in-one, do-it-all Swiss Army knife pedal. It's probably the best investment I've ever made as a gigging guitarist. It does everything, and it does a lot of it really well. Some people might say some of the simulations, amp sims, aren't that great. You got to dig in. You got to set them up. They're general. They're designed to work with the Line 6 powered speakers. So if you have it going through something else, you got to go in and you got to adjust the parameters. But this is one of the best units I've ever invested in. And then finally, at the very end of all that, we come to a good old Boss GE7. And not just any GE7. This is the mid-range graphic EQ. Let's have a look at that. You see the EQ there? It's really dialed in for guitar. This lets me do so many things. I can make humbuckers sound like single coils. I can use it for solo boost, which is actually the way it's set currently. And it's great to have control over your own solos. It gives you just that little bit extra right there between the 4, 800, and 1.2K. You could boost it up just enough to get your amp to start howling a little bit, and the sound engineer doesn't freak out. So, stepping back, we're having a look at that, and everything's powered with the Pedal Power 2 Plus, except for the Line 6 Stomp. Now there is a way to power the HX Stomp off the Pedal Power 2 Plus. You have to use 2 ports, but as you can see, I have this board completely packed, but it works. And this is, I believe, the Pedal Train Classic. I don't know if it says on the hood here what it is. It is, well, it just says Pedal Train. And it comes in a decent enough, you know, flight case style. I wouldn't actually fly with this because as sturdy as it looks, it's not, you know, ATA certified to my knowledge. So there we have that. Now moving on, we're going to talk about amplifiers. So first up is one of the simplest amps you can get. It's a Fender Tweed Deluxe. Now this one is a clone. It is not an actual Fender, but hard to tell. And one of the tricks with this is, you know, it's about 12, 15 watts, you know. This is for the small gigs, or the gigs where I want to drive the amp and get amped gain. To be perfectly honest though, the amp gain with the speaker I have is not that great. My goal with this was to have something that I could get as much clean headroom as possible. And if you look here, we have a Jensen Modern speaker series back there. And that really does allow for a little bit of extra headroom. And it keeps it clean. So, you know, I can keep this amp between, you know, but right around 3 is its sweet spot. This thing sings at 3, and it's loud enough to keep up with the drummer there. You know, you get into 4 and 5, and it starts to compress. Anything after 5, it doesn't really get louder. But to be honest, you know, I play hard rock. Most bars, you keep this at 3, and then the tone is a trick. You keep it right around 9. And it's a glorious sound. It's almost like having a plexi that's 12 watts. I mean, it's really fantastic. So that is number 1, because most of the places I play are not that big. Now, stepping up from that, we move down here. I did not get ready for this. We move down to a actual Deluxe Reverb. Now, a lot of you might say, well, why didn't you get a blackface? Well, this is a simple reason. This 68 custom Deluxe Reverb has a much better sound over driven. It is a much better sounding circuit. The trick is right here. This is a Bassman circuit on the input. And you turn this puppy up to like 9 or 10. Now that's screaming because this is 22 watts of tube power. You can play outdoor shows with the Deluxe turned up that loud, and you just ride your volume knob. But it also works in smaller venues, and you can use just a normal channel. And again, we're looking at 22 watts. Now, if you only had one amp to start and you had to do multiple things, you know, I would not recommend either of these, because they don't cover everything. So we're moving on to the next amplifier, and that is a Hot Rod Deville. Now you can do Hot Rod Devilles or Hot Rod Deluxes, and they are a less expensive amplifier, but they're reliable. There's my Hot Rod Deluxe 112, and here we have the Hot Rod Deville. Now this is a 410 version. They no longer produce these. Now they're only produced as a 212 version. They sound significantly different. If you can pick up one of these old 410 models, I would recommend it. Highly recommend it. Also, I would recommend getting an older USA built Hot Rod Deluxe or Hot Rod Deville. Even the Mexican Hot Rod Deluxe and Hot Rod Devilles they're really good, but if you can get an American one, there's a trick with the old American ones. It doesn't work on the version 3. The versions 1 and 2, you kill the treble, you kill the bass, you turn the mid all the way up. Don't use the drive channel. Oh yeah, sorry, that is the drive channel. You could use it there. You could use it the first section, and you turn it up to about there. And it's one of the best rock tones out there. Now, keep in mind, we've gone from 12 watts to 22 watts. Then we move over to 40 watts. And then we move all the way up to 65 watts, something around there. Moving on from that, so that's a loud amp, very loud amp, lots of clean headroom. You could do outdoor festivals with that, no problem. I would not recommend lugging something this large into a bar. I do have a 212 Marshall cab that I have a Friedman head on, and that's what I use for some of the super heavy modern stuff where you need just that push and punch from the gain. But if you're doing general covers, you don't need anything that fancy. You know, a combo amp is more than enough. Now on the other side of the equation, we come over here to the DSL series. Now this is the DSL 40CR. It is 40 watts. It's Marshall's version, Marshall's answer to the Hot Rod Deluxe. All right. Clean channel is okay. There's nothing to write home about. But the gain channel is fantastic. I use the second stage on the gain channel. And what's nice about these is if you get the extended foot switch, it gives you so many options. You almost don't even need a pedal board, depending on the gig. You just bring the foot switch and plug straight in. So those are the options that I typically use. Now I have other amplifiers. For instance, I got a Bassman that was converted into a combo right here. And that is a great amp. That's 50 watts. That's all you need. You don't need anything more than 50 watts for local gigs. 100-watt amps are for when you're outside and you made it to a certain point where you're allowed to get away with that. But most cases, a 12-watt amp will suffice. 22 watts is perfect. It's a good place to start. If you're big into pedals, though, do consider going with the Hot Rod series. The cost difference is negligible. I mean, I've seen these amps used for around $800. These things are not cheap, but you can get clones for like $500, and that's all this is. It's not a real Fender. It does have a turret board in it, so it is point-to-point wired, not point-to-point, but turret board wired, just like this old Bassman over here. That's a turret board. This, though, unfortunately, Fender did some things good on these amps, but they still have circuit boards. And obviously the Hot Rod series and the Marshall DSL series, that's all printed circuit boards. And, if you're gigging regularly, you will have to take them in for service, about once a year. Keep that in mind. Now I come over to another amp that actually works well for gigs, and that's a Marshall DSL 20. It's a 20-watt head, and what's nice about this is it's got a low power mode and a high power mode. So does the DSL 40, but the low power and high power mode really allow you to get a little bit closer. With the clean channel, what I like to do is I like to put it in low power mode, and I like to crank the clean channel. And if you turn it all the way up and you bring, the trick is with these amps is to leave the bass and the treble really low and just slowly find where your mids need to sit, and then you'll be set. The resonance and presence depends on the speakers you're using. But again, here's another amp that's perfect for local gigs. Now, if you have a hard-hitting drummer, the DSL 20 would probably get buried, depending on what kind of... If you're playing like classic rock, you'll be fine. If you're playing modern metal, no. Modern metal is going to definitely require at least 40 watts, at least. 50 watts is a good safe place, but 40 watts can work. And I've used this for quite a while with my band, and we are loud. Our drummer hits hard. He does not one of those guys that hits light, and he's not a Carter Buford. He's more of a John Bonham, kind of just smacking those heads. So 40 watts is a good place, but I've used both of these amps with that group, and they hold their own. Again, the best sounding amp in this room, as far as turning it up and just reusing your volume, hands down, is this guy right here. A lot of guys won't turn these up that loud, but you could like cut the air with a knife. The tone is so thick. I have yet to try that with the DSL 40, but it's not the same kind of tone stack. It's a very different set of frequencies. So those are the amps that I use. And again, if you're just trying to get one amp, I would recommend either going with a Hot Rod series amplifier, the Deluxe 40s right there, Hot Rod Deluxe. And then here's the Hot Rod Deville. And again, you can pick them up used. Just make sure you know how old they are. Ask how many hours they've been played, because the filter caps go pretty quick on these. So if you do pick one up cheap, just take it to a tech, have them go over it. Worst case scenario, you spend an extra $150, but you're going to have an amp that'll sit right. And then down here, this is actually my buddy's amp. It's a PRS SE30, and I can't stand the sound of this thing. I just can't. That's probably why he's left it here, because he doesn't want it either. It's not a good amp. It's a tube amp and it works, but it's very sterile in its sound. And then under there, we have a Gym. They're a secret amp that not a lot of guys know about, and I'll save that for another video. If you're watching this and you've watched my channel for a while, you know what's under there. But yeah, you can get them cheap now anyway. But I expect once people start really figuring out how good they are, the price will go up. So on a given gig, I'll grab my board. Most of the time I'm grabbing the Tweed Deluxe. If it's a little bigger place, I will grab that guy, the 68 Custom Deluxe. If it's outside, I'll either use my Friedman head with the 212 cab, or I'll go with the 410. Either one of those would work. And then usually I use a Les Paul. And double humbuckers is what I usually use. So that is my rig. That is the rundown for y'all. Thanks for stopping by. If you have questions about any of this stuff, please ask questions in the comments. I love talking about gear. I love, hanging out. It's cool. Maybe if we get big enough, we can start doing live streams and have live chats. That would be awesome. I'd love to do that with you guys. I have a lot of knowledge in this industry, but then again, a lot of you guys have a lot of knowledge too. And what's better than just sharing that kind of info? You know what I mean? So yeah, there's my 2020 Gibson 50s Les Paul. That thing is so nice. And it's got I put a Burstbucker 3 in the bridge. It came with the 2. So I put a 3 in the bridge, and that really just took it to where I needed it to be. All right, well, thanks for stopping by, y'all. And as usual, y'all stay safe, be kind to your neighbors, and we will catch you next time. Take care.